Welcome to College Launch. I am your host, Mary Roberts, and I'm passionate about the subject of transition, and particularly the transition that students make when they move from home to college. Today, our guest is Lindsay Page from Harvard University. Lindsay, please tell us about yourself.
Well, thanks very much for having me, Mary. My name is Lindsay Page, and currently I work at the Center for Education Policy Research at Harvard University. We're a research center affiliated with the Graduate School of Education there. And speaking of transitions, I'm actually about to make a transition of my own. After 2 great years at CEPR, the Center for Education Policy Research, I'll be transitioning to a faculty position at the University of Pittsburgh at their School of Education.
And that's so exciting. You're in a transition of your own.
That's right.
And of course, what caught my eye, first on Twitter and then led me to a Time magazine article called Stemming the Tide of Summer Melt, is that you and your colleague Ben Castleman conducted a very interesting study about texting and its effect on lower income students' ability to matriculate at college.
That's right. That's right.
And this article talked about why the summer months are so important. Would you like to talk about that?
Sure, I'd be glad to. So after students get accepted into college, typically in the spring of their senior year of high school, it's a big cause for celebration. The acceptance letter is received, and everybody can celebrate. The high schools can be proud of themselves that their students are going on to college. But what's important to remember, what our research has really reminded us, is that there are a number of things that students need to do in between receiving that wonderful acceptance letter and actually matriculating in the fall. There are things like taking placement exams, paying your tuition bill, getting your health insurance in line, figuring out how you're actually going to travel to your campus. So there are a number of things that students need to do, and it's a period of time when they don't necessarily have an obvious source of support. So students have graduated from their high school. Everybody in their high school is on summer break, and the students haven't matriculated yet to their college or university. And so it's a period of time where students could use a lot of support, both with these sort of administrative steps, but also social emotional support and encouragement for not getting cold feet about the transition to college. And it's a period of time where nobody is necessarily owning that student, is necessarily encouraging that student and nudging that student along in order to complete the steps that he or she needs to complete and to stay confident about making the transition to college.
Well, yes, I remember reading in the article that Ben Castleman called these summer months the nudge-free time.
That's right, exactly. So like I just said, it's a period of time when, when we think about students in high school students have a teacher in all of their different subjects reminding them, here's what you need to do tonight in terms of reading, in terms of your homework, in terms of things that are due a little bit further along. Once students get to college, their professors are providing them with syllabi to remind them to really pace out their coursework for the entire semester. But during the summer months, nobody is necessarily serving in that capacity to remind students of what they need to be doing in a timely way to stay on track for matriculation in the fall.
Well, I agree with you. I have had parents that I've worked with call it a time when students are suspended.
That's right.
And I literally see them on a suspension bridge between home and college.
That's right. Exactly. So our work has really thought about what can we do to help nudge or encourage students along to better support them in making this transition.
Yes, so you have a very interesting research study, and I'm wondering how you got involved in this study about texting,
Sure.
particularly lower income students.
Yeah. So I'm glad to tell you more about that. My colleague Ben Castleman, who unfortunately is not able to be with us today, and this is because he has also made a transition of his own to the University of Virginia, where he's joined the faculty, just finishing up at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. So my involvement in this work really builds on work that Ben did together with a faculty member at Boston College named Karen Arnold. And they began with a number of qualitative interview studies where they were investigating what the transition to college looked like for students, particularly students from lower income backgrounds. And what they found from interviewing students during that time was that the summer, in their words, the summer was a particularly tumultuous time for students, that students were, even students who were graduating high school in good standing, students who had college plans well in place, were reconsidering whether or where or even whether to enroll in college. And so Ben and I together collaborated in really descriptive work to understand to what extent is that really a common phenomenon? Was that a situation that was unique to this group of kids that they interviewed, or is this something that we see everywhere that's really generalizable? And what we found through looking at a variety of different data sources, so Ben and I are both quantitative researchers primarily, so we rely heavily on quantitative data, different data sets at the national level with various school districts. What we find is that this idea of summer melt, kids getting to the end of high school with college plans well in place, but then failing to matriculate in the fall, we find that this is a very generalizable, very common phenomenon. In a lot of urban public school districts, we find that as many as 1 in 5 students who intend to go on to college in the fall actually fail to matriculate.
So were you finding that this is more common among lower income students
That's right.
than middle class students?
Yeah, that's right. So we found that rates of summer melt are related to things like students' socioeconomic status, students' achievement levels in high school, so that it seems as though, our focus has particularly been on kids from lower income backgrounds. So among kids who are college ready, they get into college, again, they have plans well in place at the end of high school. Lower income kids in particular are susceptible to summer melt. Yeah. And then so to just carry the line forward to our text messaging study, the first thing that we did was implement an experiment, or an intervention really, where we had a group of students who we could identify as planning to go to college in the fall. They had just graduated from high school. And we hired counselors in one place, high school counselors. In another place here in Boston, actually, we worked with a nonprofit organization called You Aspire. And they are focused particularly on financial aid, issues of college affordability, and they have financial aid advisors that work with students in all of the Boston public high schools. So in Fulton County, Georgia, we worked with a set of high schools, and then here in Boston, we worked with You Aspire to have counselors or advisors reaching out to students proactively over the summer to ask them how are they doing with their college plans, what do they need help with, what kind of questions do they have, and always inviting them in to receive support in person. And what we found was that this kind of proactive outreach was very beneficial for students. It not only increased the rates with which they were able to matriculate to college on time, but when we are able, with the data sources that we have, to be able to follow kids through many semesters of college, it's not just that they're enrolling in college, but they're also persisting in college at higher rates. So that study when you think about that kind of intervention in a very cost-constrained environment, you always want to think about, well, how could we do this kind of outreach work more efficiently and more cost-effectively? That intervention cost us on the order of $150 to $200 a student. So it's not wildly expensive, but there's always room for improvement. And so what we then wanted to do was think about different ways that we could do this kind of outreach work, again, in a more cost-effective way. What we found from that first summer was that the counselors and advisors were really spending a large majority of their time reaching out to students. And what we also found was that the best way to reach out to students was via text message. Text message and also Facebook were hands down the best ways to find students, reach out to them, and actually get them to respond. So then what we did the following summer was we said, well, if text message is really the most effective way to reach out to students, let's continue to text students, but let's think about doing it in an automated way so that counselors weren't the ones spending hours actually writing text messages to students. So what we did last summer was we actually hired a text message provider, and we collected information on the students to whom we wanted to provide outreach. And about students, we knew their name, we knew their cell phone number, and we knew where they intended to go to college as of high school graduation. From those colleges, we gathered information about things like when the tuition bill was going to be sent, when the tuition bill was due, what the URL was for the university's student web portal, when placement exams could be taken, those kinds of things. And we used that information to provide students with a set of text messages over the summer that provided them with personalized information that they needed to know about the steps that were required to be completed in order for students to matriculate on time in the fall. And we sent these students, it was about 10 text messages, so we sent these students about 10 text messages through the summer with this personalized or customized information. And the messages, each message also gave students the opportunity to text back if they wanted assistance. And so if they texted back, then the platform, it was all automated, so the platform would then send an email to the advisor who was assigned to that student, and then the advisor could follow up with the student to provide additional support.
And I can remember reading in the research that there are a number of reasons why lower income students might be discouraged from continuing with their plans to attend college. One might be that they're the first one in their family to be going to college, so they don't have that support system. So, of course, you were providing that. Another is all the bureaucracy around financial aid. And so it sounds like these text messages touched upon the point of financial aid. The other you mentioned was how to log into the university's web portal.
That's right.
And about 6 years ago, my daughter was an entering college freshman, and I can remember receiving this information, and she was also to choose a class. And I decided that rather than have her read through all this material online, I would print it out. And this was a 50-page PDF. So I completely understand how overwhelming it would be for someone who might not have a parent like myself nudging them along.
Exactly. Exactly. So, that's one thing that we hypothesize in terms of why this kind of outreach or support might be particularly beneficial for kids from lower income backgrounds. So if I take a step back, one thing that we found in the summer intervention where, the pre-text message, where we had counselors reaching out to students. One of our sites was in Boston, and as I mentioned before, we also did this in Fulton County, Georgia. And in Fulton County, what we found was that this kind of outreach was not beneficial for kids who were not from low-income backgrounds. But it was very beneficial in terms of timely enrollment for kids who are from low-income backgrounds. And our hypothesis is very much along the lines of what you just shared about your own experience, that for kids from middle class or upper middle class backgrounds, it's likely the case that mom or dad is helping them with these steps, helping them attend to these steps or be aware that these steps even exist.
Right.
Whereas for kids from lower income backgrounds, if they're not in a community that where there's a lot of prior experience with college, there's nobody who's necessarily pushing them along or helping them to investigate what steps they need to attend to.
Well, it reminds me myself, I'm the oldest of 8 children, and when I was applying to college, I missed the deadline for financial aid, and I found myself accepted at all of my schools, but no financial aid
Oh, wow.
came forth.
Yeah.
So it is important.
It's very important.
to have a support system there.
Yeah, and related to what you say about financial aid, what we found, and again, we are continuing to analyze the data from all of these different interventions that we've tried. But what we find is that when we're able to gather information on the types of support kids are seeking over the summer, the overwhelming majority of types of support kids are asking for relate to financial aid. Either they need additional financial aid from their institution, or they need to file their promissory note. In Massachusetts in particular, this was something that we learned through doing this work in Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, state law is that by default, for students who are enrolled more than half-time in a public or private post-secondary institution, by default, the cost of student health insurance goes on your tuition bill. So that's a cost of health insurance for a full-time student can cost $1,000 or $2,000. This is typically not a line item cost that goes on your financial aid award letter in the spring. And so you could have a discrepancy of $1,000 or $2,000 between your financial aid award letter and package and the tuition bill that you actually get later in the summer. That's a big difference. So it goes on your tuition bill by default, and then you can, if your family has a qualifying health insurance plan, you can waive that fee, but that requires an additional step that's fairly nuanced, and you need to know how to navigate it. So again, You Aspire, the organization that we worked with in Boston, the advisors who we interviewed after the summer of outreach really felt as though they saved students tens of thousands of dollars in helping them navigate this health insurance waiver process. So it seems quite mundane, but you can imagine that it's a challenging process, even for those who have a college background themselves.
I remember that. We said, "What's this charge?"
Exactly.
She has health insurance. We don't need to pay this.
Yep.
Or we don't need to accept this.
Right. Exactly.
But you have to catch it.
Right. Exactly. And not just be deterred by the fact that there's a $2,000 charge on your tuition bill.
Right. Knowing that there's something that you can do about that.
Exactly.
I'm curious, you mentioned that the students who received the text messages had the option to reply and ask for assistance if they needed it. Did you have a way of measuring whether students took advantage of that?
Yeah, we did. So the text message intervention we implemented across a variety of sites. We implemented the text message intervention in 3 cities in Massachusetts, in Boston, in Lawrence, and in Springfield, Massachusetts. And then we also worked with the in Dallas, Texas. And so in all of the sites with the text message provider that we worked with, we were able to track the messages that students sent back. So we were able to see which students said, "Who is this? Stop texting me." And luckily,
Did that happen?
That did happen.
Often?
Well, only about 4% of kids said, "Please stop texting me." And of course, we stopped when they said, "Please stop." But it ranged across sites from approximately a third to a half of students responded at least once to a text message actually requesting assistance. So we were, and these response rates in general were higher than we had even guessed they would be. So our first foray into the text message campaign, we really, it was truly experimenting. We weren't sure what we would expect, but students were very responsive.
And then you actually had results by sending these text messages. A certain percentage of students were more likely to, or did, in
That's
fact, matriculate.
That's right. That's right. So, particularly in Springfield, Massachusetts, and in Lawrence, Massachusetts. So our thinking there is these are communities where they're in general low-income communities. They're communities where there are not a lot of college-going supports for students. So in those communities in particular, the text message outreach increased timely college enrollment by about 7 percentage points. So, not everybody in the world thinks in percentage point terms, but this is actually quite a big impact for educational research. And in Dallas, Texas, we had impacts on a similar magnitude for improving timely college enrollment. And just as with the counselor-based outreach, we'll continue to gather data on these students and continue to follow them and see whether these impacts on initial enrollment persist for additional semesters of college.
Yes, and I also, it's wonderful too that you have these results. You know that texting is an effective way then to reach out to students. And I think I remember reading in the study that texting was more effective than Facebook. You found that Facebook was effective, but the texting was even more effective.
Yeah, so we haven't really put them head to head to say, well, what if we just reach out to kids via Facebook, or what if we just reach out to kids by text message? But just on the sort of, you can imagine that text message should be more effective. If you look at 18-year-old today, well, if you look at me, and I'm definitely not 18 anymore, but everybody's walking around with their phone in their hand all the time. And if you have a smartphone, you have ready access to Facebook, but not every student is going to have a smartphone. And so if we're sending kids texts, they can get that message immediately. They're bite-sized messages, and so kids can respond to them right away.
I found the same. As you know, I've written a book on helping students set up their spaces at both at college at home to smooth that transition between home and college. And I've been in many residence hall rooms helping students, and if I ever had a question for them, or if I wanted to ask permission, may I use this picture that we took together, or something that you said, if I texted them, I got an immediate response.
Exactly.
If I emailed them, it might take days.
Right, that's right, that's right. So, and I confess, I'm sort of the same way. If somebody calls me and I'm not that interested in talking to them, maybe I won't answer my phone, but send me a text and I'll text you back.
Well, I think that one of the reasons summer is so critical is that this is a period of time when they are adrift. And even parents admit that it's hard to keep track of them. But there are things that students need to do so that they arrive on campus prepared. And I'm wondering what your parting words of advice might be as a result of all this wonderful work you've been doing.
Sure. One thing that we think about with this work is, we've had a lot of opportunity to talk with people about this work, and one of the criticisms or concerns is, well, shouldn't students be able to stand on their own 2 feet by this time? And the way that we like to think about it instead is, particularly for kids who are coming out of the public education system, over their 13 years of public education, we've invested hundreds and thousands of dollars in these students and hopefully helping many of them, those who want to continue on to college, helping them be ready for college and helping to send them on their way. And what we found in our research, we've been really gratified that by providing kids just really a few additional hours of support, a few additional hours of help in either a technologically savvy way or not a technologically savvy way, can be a very cost-effective strategy for improving kids' transition to college. And so as school districts, as educational agencies think about supporting their students in making this transition to college, we would encourage them to think about the summer months and what they're able to do. I think the other thing that we found, if we generalize a little bit more about this text message work, is that just sending kids personalized but bite-sized reminders of things that they need to be doing may be an effective strategy for improving outcomes for kids all along the educational pipeline, or at least as soon as kids have cell phones, that we might think about how we can capitalize on students' cell phones to provide them with timely reminders about the types of steps that we would like them to take or know that they should take in order to be successful.
Yes. So I agree with you. All this time and money has been invested in getting them into college, but college acceptance is not the end.
That's right.
And there is a lot that still needs to be done, and I am so excited about this wonderful work that you've been doing.
Thank you.
And that you have found a very effective way to communicate with students and help more of them enter college. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
And providing your knowledge with our audience. So I'm Mary Roberts. Thank you for tuning in to College Launch, and we look forward to seeing you the next time.